So recording part 2 of this hopefully quite gentle, but possibly this second part will be slightly more challenging exploration of some useful breathing processes to practice in an ongoing way. So I'll recap for sensible reasons, and just in case you've come across this first, you haven't done part 1, but I won't spend as much time. Just adding a few other elements I think that you might also find enjoyable and interesting. So we had our lips closed. And we were feeling the cool air coming in through the nostrils. And I was encouraging you to notice that you notice more with your eyes closed, which might be an odd thing to do sitting up. A lot of Feldenkrais takes place lying down, beautifully supported by the surface you're resting on so that you can let go more easily. But of course, in the real world, we do an awful lot of our breathing in a vertical position, and it's useful to get these strategies available to you in all your different ways of organising yourself, ways of being, different aspects of your daily activity. So you can close your eyes maybe and then open them occasionally if you want to check out what I'm doing, or you can lie down and close your eyes and just listen. Or you can have your eyes open and just be aware that you might not be noticing quite as much or quite as easily as you would do with your eyes closed. With your eyes closed, perhaps just feel this cool air coming in through your nostrils. And now notice some more elements of this. Notice, if you can, that your nostrils open a little to embrace the air, to welcome the air in. Particularly if you concentrate right at that area, it becomes easy to feel that there's a subtle opening of your nostrils to draw the air in. We are actually full of these sphincter actions, the opening and closing, opening to allow, closing to move on. Yeah, there's a peristaltic or breathing-like motion of opening and closing as a way of moving everything through our structure, through its various channels. And so when we breathe in, the nostril sphincters open and the sphincters at the entrance to the larynx open a little. And these things can be overridden with practice. A lot of what happens because we allow it rather than having to make it happen. But it does mean that something can happen in our experience that interferes with how easily we sense that, or indeed how easily we experience it. So nostrils flare slightly. Cool air comes in and the cool air is travelling over the floor of your nose. And your lips are closed. And if you can allow this expansion in your nostrils, you may feel it ever so slightly in your upper lip. Across the top of the upper lip, a slight lifting, an engagement with what the nostrils are doing. And I'm exaggerating it slightly so it's visible. It creates a slightly pouty effect on the upper lip, which we can come back and talk about if I have time. But this, letting the lip be part of the expansion of the nostrils, attending to the cool air as it travels over the palate, and then allow your tongue inside your mouth to settle on the underside of the nasal element of the palate, but it's the upper surface of the mouth. So have your tip of your tongue somewhere behind your upper teeth. And hopefully it will be easy to have it there and feel natural, but it may not feel natural. And I teach this a lot because as somebody who had a lot of respiratory problems, my nose would be blocked all the time. I got used to breathing through my mouth. So I got used to breathing like this. And if you breathe through your mouth a lot, your voice can go quite muddy sounding and heavy. And you get used to breathing in this way, and you'll notice actually as soon as I did it that there's a different behavior in the chest that's visible. Quite different in sensation from that feeling I was describing in part one of the air coming in through the nostrils. Cool and fresh coming down through the larynx into the center of the chest. And as the diaphragm moves down and draws the air in through your nostrils, so you can feel some sense of a paired action between the two structures, diaphragm moving down, air coming in, actually happening in a synchronized way. Abdomen expanding outwards naturally and unavoidably because your organs cannot be squashed. They can't be squashed in the same way that a water balloon cannot be squashed. They are not compressible. They have to adjust to allow that space. And if I go to breathing through my mouth, I can bypass that much more easily and end up involved in a different motion, which is not always the wrong thing to do. You can get the sense that there's right ways to breathe, and there's certainly more efficient or more calming or more appropriate ways to breathe. And it's not quite the same thing as there being a right way to breathe. So you're drawing the cool air in and you're feeling it traveling over the floor of your nose, but the floor of your nose is the roof of your mouth. See if you can allow your tongue to settle up into the dome made by your palate. So you breathe in, the air comes in through the nose, and the tongue ever so slightly increases its sense of being attached to the palate. You can get a feeling that heightens the sense of there being a slight suction between there we are, put it there, inside, that if you then released it suddenly, you get that sound I just made of the tongue making a click as it releases from the palate. So if you let your nostrils activate your upper lip, you let the upper lip, it's slight feeling like it's curling up, but it's not opening your mouth. And the air draws in deep into this sort of the well, the metaphorical well. It's coming deep into the chest, and then because of this expansion, you can picture it as coming down into a well that's more down here in the area that is important to so many more esoteric health systems and more martial arts related conversations and ideas and discussions and concepts and theories. Feldenkrais was a jiu-jitsu man originally, and then became a judo teacher, and he taught judo all his life, and he engaged with the practice of judo all his adult life, and so had a strong connection with this part of the South, the part of the South that is sometimes called the Hara, sometimes called the Dantian. I'm sure it has other names as well. Very close in terms of our biophysical structure to our center of gravity. And we can have a feeling of the air being drawn to here, though what's actually happening is the diaphragm is expanding downwards and causing this displacement and just creating a connected sense down to this place. And what's down here is an interweaving of the deepest parts of the diaphragm as they attach to the lumbar spine, and the structures coming up from the lower half that support and power our motion, our gait, structures, the psoas muscles, the iliopsoas muscles, quadratus lumborum are there, stabilizing and giving us a sense of stability and strength in our lower back, all of those structures. Engaging around there by breathing into this space, breathing in a place that feels very much like our center. So we're establishing that down there. I'm going to establish a connection with our hands up here. So as you breathe, just pay attention to, so anyone with their eyes closed, when I said down there, I've got my hand on the rounded bit of my abdomen, rounder on women usually than men, that's just below my navel. And the instructions I first heard for locating the dantian is that it's 2 finger widths down from the navel and 2 finger widths inward inside you. Very close again to that front of your back, the front of the part of your spine that's most inside you, right down in there. So I've got one hand there and one hand on my breastbone. And if you want to, obviously feel free to open your eyes and check where my hands are. And I'm going to add something here that comes from a wonderful man called Dr. Dan Siegel. He strongly suspects that there's a real preference that's built into your nervous system. It may not be that it never changes, but what he suggests is that one way round for your hands will feel more natural. That you might prefer, as I do, the left hand on the chest and the right hand on the abdomen, or for you it might be that it's the other way round, and that if you find the way round that feels the most natural to you, the most comfortable to you, that will add to the beneficial effects of what we're doing, because it will bring you into a state that is sometimes referred to as coherence. Particularly with relation to the functioning of the heart. So if you just easily breathe through your nose, feel free to open your eyes if you want to see some of what I'm doing. Cool air coming in, passing over the floor of the nose and over the roof of the mouth, these two being matched. They're the same thing from a different viewpoint. And the tongue staying attached to the palate very comfortably. And everything expanding, maybe even evenly, yeah? So if I do this, I've had years of practice, both hands move. And they move very softly and lightly, but they move. And when I'm sitting, I can feel myself balancing on my sitting bones, and that's more useful than for clarity. Not more useful necessarily if what you're doing this for is to give yourself a little boost. You might want to be very relaxed and rested on a sofa. But if you want to really feel what happens in your whole structure, you might like to do this perched a little on your sitting bones, maybe a little more towards the front of your chair. Have the air come in. Feeling everything expanding. And then everything softly moving inwards again, kind of condensing. Some things are contracting, but not in an aggressive way necessarily, as the warm air comes out of your nose. And if I do this balanced on my sitting bones very easily and clearly, I sense myself ever so slightly lengthening on the in-breath. And then when I breathe out again, I allow myself not to collapse again. So I lengthen through my spine. A slight sense of internal opening in this vertical plane, this vertical dimension, perhaps a slightly clearer thing to say. Yes, as I breathe in. So let's see if we can play with this. There's a real classic Feldenkrais lesson, sometimes called Seesaw Breathing. Probably got other names as well. Most of our lessons have other names, but I like Seesaw for what will become obvious reasons. And in order to get a sense of that, I'm going to breathe into my chest in a slightly more exaggerated manner. I'm going to let my rib cage do this opening up and out feeling. I like the image of an umbrella opening. Yeah, there's sort of, most of us have that experience that we've watched an umbrella open and it opens upwards and outwards at the same time. And that's a good metaphor for the expansion of the rib cage. So we're going to exaggerate that on purpose so we start to get used to the feeling of the ribs moving, and the ribs moving in a conscious way for us, a way that's we're aware of. So as you do that, and then when you exhale, same idea in reverse, that you feel your ribs contracting again, dropping down, coming closer together, both between each rib and in relation to the two sides of you. So you widen and you move a little upwards as you breathe in, and then you narrow and you close a little inwards as you breathe out. And then to do that on purpose, and when you're ready and it feels clear enough, to hold your breath and not let it escape. So it doesn't come out of your nose, you're holding it. The easiest way to do that is to just let the sphincters here softly close. You're holding, you've made a shape here that is going to be a little unchanging. It's a fixed volume. Make that fixed volume, and then without letting the air escape, to contract the chest. So give it a try. Might be easier to do this with your eyes closed. You breathe in. Let the ribcage really expand in an exaggerated manner, which doesn't mean you're clenching your abdomen. It just means you're not privileging abdominal breath over ribcage breath. You're allowing everything to expand, but you're focusing on the rib movement. Once the breath is held, contracting the ribs, because you're now of a sort of fixed volume, means that the air is being pushed inwards, and therefore, because it can't go upwards, you've blocked it off here, everything's going a little down, diaphragm's being pushed a little downwards, and your abdomen's extending outwards. And then if you lift the ribs up again, still without letting the breath go, you draw everything back up under your rib cage, and you've got a adjustable seesaw-like motion happening between the two hands. So let me show you what that looks like. While confessing that we don't usually demonstrate, we're trying to avoid giving you the idea that what you're doing should look a particular way. What you're looking for is a clear sensation that you begin to sense in a reliable way, in a, that you've learned it. I know how this feels. I'm going to show you what it looks like from the side, just in case looking at yourself in a mirror gives you a bit of extra feedback. So from the side you get the seesaw effect, I think, a little more clearly. I'll do it with the hands in both positions. So here, chest, abdomen, air in, other way around. I'm going to breathe out, breathe in again. So it's a little like squeezing the top of a balloon. I squeeze the lungs, and then this has to get a little swole, and then I lift the lungs. I don't squeeze the abdomen, I just lift the ribs back up and the top There we go. This has accidentally ended up being advertising of the egg, but they're a bit hard to get, these eggs nowadays. Anyway, there you go. So you've got this back and forth, and that's that seesaw effect. Have a little break from that. Have a little wriggle if you need it. Now this has all kinds of potential value. I'll talk a bit more about that at the end. And I'll talk you through it a couple more times so you've really got the idea of what you're playing with. And then once you've got the basic feeling of the seesaw there, I can talk while I do this one. Part 2, I won't be able to talk. So just notice that I can speak here because there's some air in my lungs. Once you've got the basic maneuver, then what's particularly useful, there's 2 things really. First of all, really refining it so that your ribs are managing the process for you. That is the rib cage opening and closing that's initiating everything else. And when you're lying down, sometimes it's more useful to lie down for this because gravity will help you. When you lie down and do this, your shoulders drop back to the surface you're resting on. You can let your head rest on whatever it's on so that you can monitor the ease in your neck. You can deal with any tension that's generated in your jaw. And indeed at the other end, if you're sort of clenching around the hip joints or around your pelvic floor, you can monitor a little more easily and make sure you're letting go. So that's a good reason to practice this lying down. Good reason to practice this standing up is it can be beneficial to you finding ways to allow your spine to stay long when you're sitting. It can help you reach places all the way up and down your spine that might be feeling tight and begin to expand them just by being a little more precise about how you're doing what you're doing here. So breathing in, holding the air inside the chest cavity and creating a closure in here in the larynx, and then closing the ribs in a way that allows this to really move freely. And if you're interested in yoga, some of this may seem familiar. And if you're interested in yoga, you've probably already taken on board the idea that breathing can be something that massages the organs. And I have to confess to feeling slightly stupid when it suddenly dawned on me that the breathing, the movement up and down of the diaphragm wasn't just massaging the organs below the diaphragm. It was also giving a nice massagey stimulus to the heart. And the lungs. And the lungs, of course, that's their job, so it's not so exciting for them. There you go. So, this way of activating your internal substance, all these structures, is very naturally, and I don't think it's controversial to suggest that it might improve your well-being. Everything inside us needs to be able to move freely within its lovely complex fascial webbing, and these movements help with that. So part 2 of this seesaw breathing process, which is gone into in some detail in one of Feldenkrais's earliest books, the one that is called in English Awareness Through Movement, is to do the same thing but to exhale first. And when you exhale first, you're contracting everything within your chest. So the first action once you start holding your breath, the very next thing you do is you lift the ribs. And you lift the ribs up, and what that's going to do, it's going to draw what's in your lower half upward to fill the slightly vacuumous sensation of shifting space you've got inside your thorax, so inside your chest and rib cage. So hands will help you monitor. I will talk you through it once, and then I will show you what it looks like once you've had a chance to feel it without being influenced by what I'm doing. but I can't talk while I'm doing it. So I'm not going to do it right now. I'm going to give you the instruction and then I'll do it and I won't be talking. So, but you let the air out nice and slow, let everything contract, everything feel very contained in your chest. Hold the breath out. Now, some people can't do that easily. Sometimes you need to hold your nose to help you not breathe out. Not breathe in, sorry. So you're holding the breath out, you're not letting yourself breathe in, lifting the ribs up, and that's drawing your abdominal contents upwards. And that can be a more intense feeling, and it can be a little weirder than part one. Yeah? So you exhale, let everything out. And then lift the ribs. And you're also getting the seesaw action, very similar to the previous, but feels more intense because now your lungs are more empty. They're not completely empty. The lungs do not completely empty unless there's been some kind of severe injury. It's always a little air, in quotes, in there, preventing the inner surfaces from sticking together and becoming uncomfortably dysfunctional. There we are. Like a collapsed lung is the word. So let's do that again. Exhaling, 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 letting everything contract comfortably, not tense. We don't do anything in Feldenkrais in a tense or uncomfortable way. Might feel weird, but it shouldn't feel uncomfortable. Holding the breath out and allowing the ribs to lift up, holding your nose if you need to, until you've got the hang of it. Because once you've got the hang of it, this isn't difficult. It's just weird. It's unfamiliar. Once you've got the hang of that more intense version, you can turn it into a breathing process that naturally slows the breath, that allows you to hold the breath in a very safe way because you're not clenching and tensing yourself up. And that's easy to do anywhere, actually. Once you've got the hang of it, you could be doing this while you're stuck on a bus or whatever it is that's holding you up in your day. You can stop and do a little bit of this. So let's go through it as a pattern. And I'll talk you through it and do it with you. And as I do that, I won't be talking during the second half in quite the same easy way. So breathe in, let everything expand. Chest feels nice and big and round, and then you squeeze that roundness in such a way that the abdomen expands to allow the diaphragm to move down. And you lift the ribs up again, down again, and you've got this seesaw action, opposing up and down movements, or forward and back, actually, is a good way to think about it when you're sitting, of the two hands. And then when you exhale, you let the chest get very contracted in comparison to how it was before, without, you haven't breathed out all your air, but you've breathed out a lot of your air, and now do the same seesaw. You get this same opposing hand action, and you can begin very quickly to make it smoother, more flowing and fluid, and hopefully that feels nicer to do. People sometimes do a quite sort of jerky version. That's not terrible, but you won't sense as much. The faster you're moving and the more effort you're putting into something, the less easy it is for you to notice anything interesting that's going on in the whole of yourself. Yeah, it focuses your attention where you're trying hard. And if you start to play instead with getting something that feels a little smooth and flowing, also gives you more time to, oh yeah, I can relax my shoulders a little more. Or I don't need to be curling my toes or gritting my teeth or clenching my sternocleidomastoids. Nothing else needs to be helping this movement. It can be done entirely by the movements you're activating via your rib cage. So that's seesaw breathing, and it has a relationship with something that has a couple of names: reverse breathing, paradoxical breathing, where some of us actually kind of naturally breathe in such a way that when we breathe in, we lift the ribs more, and when we breathe out, we push out here. And reverse reverse suggests that the right way to do it would be the other way around. It's not that it's reversed exactly, because what it's different from is the natural breath, where everything expands very easily and everything contracts very easily, as you'd expect when you're taking in air. You know, that's filling you up with a little extra something, so the extra something should expand everything, and then we're exhaling and contracting everything. So this isn't quite that. Reverse is kind of a poetic name. Paradoxical has the same sort of assumptions in it, that it's kind of not the way we normally breathe. And for some people it is the way they normally breathe. And if you have any breathing issues, I used to have a lot of asthma, then that may be one of your habits. So you might notice this more if you're breathing more intensely. So some people, you might notice it if you're laughing and you're pushing out here when you laugh. That might be a clue that something like that is going on for you. But I'm mentioning it here not to suggest it's something that you might automatically want to include when you're practicing, but just to say that the time I did it in a very dedicated way was before I did Feldenkrais. I was learning Tai Chi. In my class, my first class that I was in, we did the reverse breathing all the way through the forms. All the time we're doing these lovely, gentle actions, we were reverse breathing at the same time. And it was the first time anything I'd ever done had improved my stamina. So not quite sure what the mechanism was, but it made a real difference. And it may well simply be that by doing the breathing more consciously, making sure I was doing a conscious breathing practice while I was doing the form, that may have been what it was, rather than the conscious breathing practice itself. So I'm not going to make any exaggerated claims for it, just to say that if you've come across the idea that there's something valuable with that kind of breathing, I think it can be. What I would say is it's not very helpful in a performance context. But breathing for performing deserves a whole recording in itself. So I will come back to breathing for performing at another time. So I hope you get some enjoyment and pleasure out of playing with that. And I'll see you soon. Bye.